everyone. Thanks for joining me today. So, today I want to talk to you about the voices that we hear. So, I know it sounds weird, but let me explain. So, a lot of the times when we kind of have thoughts about ourselves, whether they are positive or negative, we just kind of like they play out, right? They play out in our minds, and our thoughts go a certain direction depending on how we feel about ourselves. If we're confident, then we think more positive things about ourselves. If we're not confident, or if we're struggling with something, whether it's an insecurity or just some kind of negativity, then we're probably more likely to have negative thoughts. And a lot of the times, for some people, it's just purely a thought. It's yourself that's thinking these things. That's your own voice that you're hearing in your mind that's talking about these things, and it just comes in the form of thoughts. But there's some people that their negative thoughts, especially, are kind of reflective of people from their lives who maybe have said negative things to them in the past. And these things just got stuck, right? So that's what I mean by voices. I'm not talking about any kind of hallucination or anything like that. I'm talking about influence and impact, and who are the people in our lives who have said things for better, for worse. And typically, I think it more ends up being negative when we think of other people's voices impacting us, or like things they've said. But who are those people in our history, whether it's way, way back when we were little or more recent? Who are those people whose voices resonate in our heads, and we just kind of hear what they've said, and maybe we repeat that to ourselves in times of struggle or times of vulnerability? And the reason I'm bringing this up to you is because a lot of the times when I have conversations with people about insecurity or just some kind of low confidence situation, or a past, maybe even trauma, a lot of the times it's, when we talk about how do you deal with that, or why do you struggle with that, and why do you think you're not pretty or attractive, why do you think that you're overweight when you're not, why do you think you're not smart, why do you think you're not capable, where does this come from? A lot of the times those conversations go in the direction of, well, my parent, or the kids at school, I was bullied, or someone used to make fun of me, or my parents really hard on me, or my grandma told me I wasn't smart enough, or whatever, right? Like, there's so many examples of how people's past experiences with others really, really just kind of linger, and they're the reason that we think about ourselves the way that we do. And I always have these kinds of conversations with people. I work with a lot of people who have self-esteem issues, or confidence issues, or anxiety, depression, all kinds of things. And a lot of the time that comes with negative self-thought, negative perspectives of yourself, of what you think about yourself, or what you assume other people think of you. And so there's a lot of fear of judgment that goes around. People who struggle with insecurities will worry that other people think negatively of them, or that other people are judging them, or other people are going to make fun of them for something. And sometimes that doesn't even have anything to do with that person they think is judging them. It could be something that happened years ago, or that is rooted in their in their past, and now they just assume that because they had this negative experience or trauma, that other people must believe the same thing, and that that's just what's expected. And the reason I'm bringing that to you is because I think that to some extent we all have an experience we can remember where we're like, oh yeah, someone said something hurtful to me when I was little, or as a young adult, or last week, I don't know, someone said something hurtful and it really stuck with me, and I just couldn't shake it, and I really took it to heart, and I internalized it, and now I can't stop thinking about it. And everyone can probably relate to some kind of experience where their feelings were hurt, or something was said that really stuck. Now, a lot of people can shake those things off, and it really doesn't linger long term, and it's something that they can move on from and just put it out of their minds. But then there are a lot of people who struggle to move on from that, and there are different reasons. If you have if these kinds of things happen a lot when you're small, when you're a child, it's harder to overcome that because you don't have that foundation of confidence and security in your identity to be able to recognize that that's bullying, or that's just coming from a jealous person or an insecure person, and they're projecting this negativity onto you. And so you don't know to challenge that. You don't know to say, well, that's not right. I know I'm smart. I know I'm attractive. You hear that, especially if it's coming from someone that matters to you, like a parent or a sibling or some kind of important adult or figure in your life, whether it's a peer or older. It's really, really hard to shake that off because that just feels like truth. If they, if mom, I know mom loves me, and if mom's saying that I'm not smart enough, or mom says I'm stupid, then she must be right, kind of thing. And there are some things that are said intentionally to hurt children, and there are some things that are said accidentally. Like you don't mean, you're telling someone to, let's say you tell a kid to stop talking, they're too loud and they're always so annoying because they talk so much. You might just be frustrated as an adult when you say that. You might not mean that as like you're always so annoying. You might just mean like, hey, right now you're being annoying. You're talking too much and it's really annoying. Well, that kid might hear it as like, oh my gosh, mom thinks I'm annoying. I'm an annoying person. So then you'd be surprised how kids internalize things, and then they go into themselves, like they start shutting down, they start changing certain dynamics of their behavior because they're scared of being, to upset an adult or disappoint or get in trouble. And again, sometimes parents do things, they have anger issues, for example, and they are very aggressive in their parenting, and that's something that affects the kid. And sometimes it's just a passing comment, right? And so, we teach our kids to be resilient, but it's a different conversation about how to talk to kids. I'm kind of reflecting more on being the recipient of that. If you are someone that you can reflect on your past, and you can recognize, hey, there were situations where things were said that got in my head and made me question myself, or really led to this adult version of me now that still really remembers that, or really struggles with that, and you can't shake it off. And so I'm kind of just trying to bring up any kind of examples that you might be able to relate to. You may have had nothing like that, where your or family and parents are very encouraging and supportive, but maybe someone at school was rude. Maybe a teacher wasn't encouraging. Maybe a peer was rude or disrespectful or made fun of you, or all kinds of things. And then, we also look at how we've talked about social media and comparing to other people, whether it's appearance or lifestyle or vacations, or the list goes on. But we sometimes develop these inner thoughts about ourselves based on how we compare ourselves to other people. And I would say that is very common, but I think most of my experience in working with people is that it's rooted in something that was said directly to that person, and that's what leads to them having this negative self-thought. But nowadays, I think, and this probably also for another bigger conversation, but I think a lot of kind of the up and coming generation now is more, like maybe people in their late teens, early 20s, they're a lot more susceptible to the things that are happening online and social media because they've grown up with it and that's all they know. And so it's harder to shake online bullying or comparing to other people. It's just very, they're inundated with that. But for older generations that didn't have that, I think a lot of it just mostly came from more face-to-face interactions where someone maybe said something hurtful. But I kind of want you to think about that, because I think a lot of the work that we do as adults in, reflecting on ourselves and reflecting on our history and our upbringing is really just understanding ourselves more, understanding why we handle things the way we do, understanding why we react to certain things. If you're a parent, then you probably have interacted with your child in a certain way that you are not proud of. Maybe you raised your voice, or maybe you said something you shouldn't have said, or maybe you were not patient with your child when they were doing something. And a lot of the times we have those kind of punch in the gut moments as parents, where we're like, I could have handled that better, or it could be even with a peer, a family member. It doesn't have to be your child. It could be a business situation, where you snap off, pop off on someone, say something you shouldn't say, and then you regret it. But that, I think that part of what we should all continue to do is grow. And by grow, I mean try to learn about ourselves, try to be aware of why we do the things that we do. I'm very big on understanding myself and why I feel the way I feel about things, why I do the things. Like if I want to do something or don't want to do it, I try to make sure I understand why, because it's important. It's important for me to be intentional with the decisions that I make in my life. And yeah, some things you just wing it and there isn't a whole lot of thought to it. But the bigger things, I think it's important to be just be in tune with why you do what you do. And especially when we're influencing other people, if we're in a role of leadership, if we're a parent or an older sibling and we have influence on someone else, I think it's also extra important. But when we are reflecting on ourselves and where we've come from and why we do the things we do, I think a lot of the times we recognize that some of our behaviors stem from things that were done towards us as children or when we were younger. And we don't realize what we hang on to. We don't realize what sticks with us and that just becomes a way of us handling things. I work with people who have issues, they self-identified anger issues, right? And they're like, well, I just get mad all the time and I don't know what to do about it. And when we get talking about it, let's say someone who yells at their spouse or their child. And when we talk about it, they're like, well, that's just how my dad was, or that's how my mom was. And so that's what I grew up with. And that is just, okay, if that's where you've come from, that's unfortunate. But that's not an excuse. It doesn't justify why you have a problem with managing your anger today. It might be an explanation, and again, being mindful and understanding, reflecting why you do what you do. This is an example of why that's so important. If you have a problem with being aggressive verbally or physically or whatever, and you can look back and say, well, that's how I was raised. Excellent awareness. I think that's fantastic. I'm glad you're thinking about that. But what are you going to do with that knowledge? Are you going to let that just be an explanation or a justification that you continue to say, well, that's just how I was raised, so everyone needs to just accept it? Or are you going to see that as, yes, an explanation, but one that you need to actively counteract and work to overcome? Because it's not good enough that you were raised in that. That's not going to work. If you're going to be a responsible, mature adult, you need to work on making better choices and learning from your mistakes and owning your mistakes and doing what you can to fix them. That's what we teach children, right? So if our kids make mistakes, they get in trouble, there's discipline involved, and then we expect an apology. How often do we expect that of ourselves as adults? When we make a mistake towards other adults or towards children, do we take ownership of that? Do we apologize and try to make it better? Some people do. Some people don't. Some people think that they're justified because of the role they play or the authority that they carry. But as humans, as members of society, as people who are socially involved with other people, we are responsible for being responsible and mature and making an effort to be good people. But that only works if we're working on ourselves, if we're aware of how we treat other people. But to be good at treating other people, we have to understand why we do what we do. We have to understand, is this coming from a place of like just, maybe your experiences maybe you've just had a really rough life, and as a result, you're just a really hard person, and you're just angry at the world, and you're angry at everyone, and you have a really low tolerance for, low patience for people. Well, that's you needing to understand that. Why are you like that? What happened to you that caused you to be that way? And that kind of goes back to kind of those voices I was talking about. Like, whose voice are you hearing? And you can really kind of think back, even if it's not a specific person, is it an experience that you had where someone said something or expected something of you, or maybe said you weren't capable of something, and now you've spent your life trying to prove to yourself or to other people that you can do certain things or that you're capable? And, are you kind of walking through life with this need to prove, or this, we say it's chip on your shoulder, right? Like you've got something that you're trying to achieve because you need to prove yourself somehow. And if you do have that, then I'm going to challenge you to think about where that comes from, because most likely that's coming from something or someone, like an experience in your past where you felt insignificant, insecure, less than, somehow just little, low about yourself. And that translated into this internal need to achieve or to prove yourself. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like sometimes those things motivate us to be hard workers and to really do well and be successful, but everything in moderation, right? So if you're so driven or so hard on the people around you or so hard on yourself because of these past experiences, well, you probably want to work on that. At the very least, you want to understand where it's coming from. And, I run into this a lot when I work with couples where, whenever you marry someone or you're in a relationship, you live with someone, you're merging your life with another person. Even if you grew up in the next door, houses right next to each other, you're still very different people. And when you come together and you try to merge that life, you're going to find that you have a lot of differences that need to be worked through. And there isn't a right or wrong way of we're going to do it your way or your way, but it's more of how do you meet in the middle? How do you compromise? And there are some people that are so set in their ways because of having that, experience that really primed them to deal with life a certain way or to view people a certain way or to view themselves a certain way, that it just creates this barrier between these couples where they can't really be vulnerable with each other. They really can't trust each other, or they don't receive affection or love well because they have all of this stuff that they have floating around in their mind where they think of themselves a certain way, or their perception that is that other people will never love them fully or other people are judging them. So being aware of how you view yourself, why you view yourself that way, where does that come from? That is just, it's responsible adulting. And we, when we talk about having emotional intelligence, I think that is also part of it, is being plugged in and tuned in to why we do the things that we do, and understanding how to handle things, how to cope with things, how to manage our emotions. But you cannot learn to manage anything unless you understand it. And so, a lot of the times I have people that are like, oh, I want to go to anger management. I'm here for anger management. I'm like, great. What are you angry about? Well, I'm angry about it. Okay, where does that come from? I don't know. Well, I can't teach you how to manage it and get better at it until we understand where it's coming from, because there is a root cause here that it's just like any tree or plant or anything. There's roots. It's been growing for a long time. You don't just wake up angry. You have history that has led you to the way that you are today. And that applies to sadness. If you're talking about depression, anxiety, you don't just wake up and have depression. You don't just wake up and have anxiety. There are root causes of most things. It could be something that just happened last week and we can identify that's the root cause. Great. It could be something that happened 20 years ago and it's just continued to fester and grow. Well, we got to work on that. And it doesn't mean it's going to take you 20 years to unpack it. It just means that we've got to get clarity. And sometimes you can bring it out to the surface, and just acknowledging it can be this life-altering perception where you're like, wow, I understand this. Now I know what to do about it. And then in other situations, you can bring it up, and then it takes a while to really process the details. It's maybe really complicated, and we're going to have to work on it for a while. But either way, that only happens if you have self-awareness, if you understand. So, full circle, going back to the beginning, what are the things that you tell yourself? Is it your voice of negativity? Is it someone else's voice of negativity that you have carried with you? Just think about that. If while I was talking to you, if things popped up in your head, memories, or just a flicker of an image of how somehow this applies to you, take a minute and just bring that up. Think about it, talk to a friend or a family member about it, talk to a therapist about it, or just think about it on your own journal, whatever works for you. But I'm all for self-awareness. I'm all for control. If you understand yourself, then you are in control of yourself. If you don't understand yourself, then you don't control yourself at all. You don't know how to, why you do the things you do, you're just operating. And I would really like you to be intentionally knowing yourself and understanding yourself. So I I hope that this gives you something to think about. Take more control of that, understand that more. And if there are deep rooted issues of why you are negative and you have those things that play out in your head, you might need some extra support. You might need a therapist or some professional to help you with that. So I encourage you to seek that out. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.